The somatic leadership, or somatics in particular, the part of leadership develop, like unfolding. The somatic part really is about helping leaders to exercise choice and possibility. That in any moment in time, I have the choice / possibility within myself to choose my state, to regulate myself, to have the tools and practices that enable my body to shift fluidly.
Franziska Gonder is a leadership coach, somatic practitioner, and entrepreneur who seeks to spread a new type of leadership that heals the world. In this wide-ranging conversation, we discuss the art of somatic leadership and how it can increase your agency, capacity, and the possibilities for your life.
I started to appreciate the nuance in my body, really, of just like, I'm not really developing, there's no goal. I don't have a goal in developing my leadership. It's an unfolding, almost like there's an edge that unfolds within me that gives me a new lens on things, a new capacity for things.
Somatic leadership helps us step more deeply into our authenticity so that the forces of life can work through us.
More and more and more come back to sort of like my essence, almost like witnessing myself more like a channel rather than like someone who holds like strong opinions or like knows exactly what the path is for myself and everyone else.
One place we can learn a lot from in our journey to authenticity is our children. Franzi shares some powerful anecdotes in her life as a parent, as well as how she's trying to encourage some of these principles in her children's lives.
Kids actually show us the exact opposite, right? I'm sure you're seeing this with your child too. They know exactly what they need to do, when they need to do it, and they signal in. They're tired, they go to bed, right? They fall asleep right there, right then, like no problem. It's almost like we unlearned our innate responses as part of our conditioning. For many of us, it is the biggest journey to sort of like come back to being in alignment with our innate responses and understanding our innate signals of our bodies.
Did you know that our nervous systems not only prevent us from experiencing pain, but also can prevent us from experiencing deep amounts of joy and bliss? In this conversation, Franzi provides some powerful suggestions on how we can more fully occupy the full spectrum of emotions, including the positive ones.
The expansion in our bodies makes us feel extremely uncomfortable because it makes us feel vulnerable. If your body experiences vulnerability or openness, expansion as a threat, right? Because, for instance, as a child, all your playfulness was met with annoyance or anger, and was like, shut up, be quiet, right? Don't be so loud. Like, go do that, whatever it is, right? So your body kind of like programmed in a way, just sort of like, I get to have fun up until this point.
Before we get into this conversation, I want to ask you to join this amazing community of consciousness explorers. This whole idea of pursuing expanded consciousness and the boundaries of human potential while living a modern life is relatively new, which is why we interview revered masters, teachers, experts, and practitioners to help you on your own journey. To stay up to date on the latest conversations, simply click subscribe below and you'll be notified each time a new episode comes out. I am so grateful for all of your support and comments. I love reading them. Now let's dive into this conversation. Hey, Franzi, it's great to see you.
Likewise. Super happy to be here. Really, really happy.
Well, I thought I would start this conversation off with just kind of a soundbite that really struck me the last time that we connected for just kind of a personal call. You said something that I thought was very profound, and that was that the nervous system of the organization is a reflection of the nervous system of the CEO or the leader. And maybe I butchered that a little bit, but I think hopefully people get the general idea. And let's talk about that. What do you mean by that? How does that show up?
Yeah. I've experienced that several times. I think this is where it comes from. I've experienced it several times that early on in my career, for lack of a better word, not my favorite word. And then also as sort of like my own entrepreneurial journey unfolded, I even noticed it within myself that when I was coming from a regulated, capacious, expansive place, I would be able to give that to my people. I would be able to offer that same level of curiosity and understanding and benefit of the doubt. Like it's almost like there was more humanity taking place in relationships. There was more a greater ability to sort of like understand each other and evolve and be creative with each other. And if I would just come in from like, guys, this has to get done, like kind of like the helicopter management kind of like style, making a bunch of air and then, you leave and then everybody's like, whoop, what was that? That was fairly dysregulating, like me experiencing it, but then also like being the person that maybe was this way too. I'm sure I was, pretty sure I was. And I could always feel the tension in the room. I could feel like how people were like left without a bunch of answers that they may have needed, because I was leading with answers. I was not leading with questions. I was dysregulated myself. I was stressed. I was nervous. I was overwhelmed, whatever it was. Right. And through the mirror neurons that we all have in our brain, right? The neurons that sort of like help us to emulate and sort of like perceive each other in that sense. And people look for you as a leader. They look out for you in the way that they want to see what is right and what is wrong. And I think that's a responsibility we all have to understand. And so it is my responsibility as a leader to practice nervous system capacity, to practice emotional fluidity, to understand what it is that I'm bringing into the room energetically, and how that has an effect on my people. So this is where that comes from as a start.
I love that, and
deeper.
I definitely also have personal experience with when that's not the case. So I can maybe that's why it resonates so much. But I think a lot of people hear this and they go, "Yeah, I'm on board. That makes sense. I want to show up and be present and just be calm and kind of come from that expansive state." But when the rubber hits the road and they're in between meetings or they have a million things to do, like this just kind of falls to the wayside and is a nice idea, but never actually becomes actualized. And so, like, how do you help executives make that jump from nice idea, yeah, sounds good, I get it, to like, this is actually my lifestyle now?
Mm-hmm. Great question. The somatic leadership, or somatics in particular, that the part of leadership like unfolding, is the somatic part really is about helping leaders to exercise choice and possibility. That in any moment in time, I have the choice / possibility within myself to choose my state, to regulate myself, to have the tools and practices that enable my body to shift fluidly. And to be aware when I am in certain states, right? I think and this is where practice becomes like an absolute non-negotiable. I can't expect to show up for a coaching call once a week with Francie, and then we practice those things, and then, over the next 7 days, I will run all my meetings fluidly. I have to commit as a leader to practice that type of presence, right? So that ranges from things like breathing, right? Knowing how to regulate myself. That also goes into how do I witness myself throughout the day. That's a practice, right? So for instance, there's an exercise that I do where I tell my folks to put a time in their calendar every day around noonish. So some like a time when they have already been part of their own day for a little while, and they have several hours left at work, and they sort of like track their emotional charge. And so sort of like learning how to witness yourself. What does that mean, right? Like emotional charge could be like, I'm super chill, actually. What did I just do? Where am I going? Why am I so chill right now? Right? Understanding what influences them and what doesn't. I'm super stressed, right? Like I feel agitated. I feel overwhelmed. I feel tired. What did I eat? Where did I just come from? Who did I meet? Who are the people that I'm spending time with today? Like what is happening that is influencing my energy unconsciously? And we want to move that into consciousness. We want to become aware of how our body responds to certain events, triggers, etc. So that's a practice, right? And so that's usually where it starts. And then from there, we oftentimes have like certain breakthroughs that are experiential. So it could be that a person realizes that they're always triggered after certain meetings. And so we want to go into the trigger and kind of like understand, like, where does that come from? Like, what is your relationship with that type of relationship or that type of stress, or, and sort of like understand what that costs us. Like, what does it cost me in my daily leadership to respond to that overwhelm in the way I do, for instance? And that question in and of itself oftentimes leads to a little bit of like not just a like cognitive aha moment, but just kind of like, because of like heart drops for a moment, being like, oh shit. Like,
oh shit. I react like this every freaking day. I mean, that's the
it's
thing.
A pattern. It's a pattern. Yeah.
Totally. That's the thing why I personally believe like just consciousness work is just so high leverage, because it's like, man, you have these literal scripts that play out hundreds and thousands of times that you can just,
in so many ways too.
Yeah. You can just unobstruct yourself from. You can just you don't have to keep playing the movie tape. But I'm so happy that you brought up this idea that like noticing them is a practice, right? It's not like one day you're like, oh, I read a book about somatic leadership or conscious leadership and decided that I'm going to start becoming the witness of what's happening in my body and, where my mind goes. And when I get triggered, it's like, it's a journey. It's a journey, and it takes time. And then I don't know if this happened to you, but it's just like one day you wake up and it's almost like this, like all of a sudden you're just like, oh yeah, I'm just always watching that stuff now. And that's just like what I do. And like, I can't imagine not doing it. And like, it's a very weird experience.
I mean, how many repetitions, right? Like when I think about some of the stuff that I had to work through for myself, it's not like 50 or 100. It's like 500, 1,000, 1,500, 2,000. You know what I mean? It's like sometimes a year, two. Like there's like some stuff that is like, that was so conditioned within myself that there were moments where I was like, why am I doing this? But it was so important. I said before we hit the record button, I said to you, right, like one of my intentions for this is relational presence today. Right. And that was like, that's a major motivation for me in general in life, relational presence with others and myself. Because so much good comes from that. And so much authenticity and just ease. I think that's what it is also for me. It's like so much ease comes from relational presence. And so when I commit myself to certain ways of being, or like something that I need to work on to unfold, in new ways and get to know myself in different ways. Like it really comes from that place of just what will improve? How will I relate to myself and others in a different way? How does it expand my view on life? What is it that I can gift others as a result of this? How do I serve differently because I've done this work? I'd happily die thinking like, I've always grown in order to respect the service that I can give to others. So that feels good.
That's awesome. I love the word, you use the word unfoldment. I feel like that's a hot word right now in the world of spiritual. I don't even know. Maybe it's because I'm taking the Alethea coaching program right now.
Maybe.
They use that word a lot, but I feel like I'm hearing a lot about unfoldment. And one distinction that I feel like I saw you make somewhere is leadership development versus leadership unfoldment. And I think that's a kind of an interesting, powerful frame that I'd love to explore what that means, the difference is for you.
Yeah. I think that was also a development for me. I think I started my work even when I wasn't full time. Like I started my work very much with the lens of like leadership development as like a concept, as a sort of like that's what I do or that's what I'm practicing with others and myself. I think over the years, I think I started to appreciate the nuance in my body really of just like I'm not really developing. There's no goal. I don't have a goal in developing my leadership. It's an unfolding. It's like there's an almost like there's an edge that unfolds within me that gives me a new lens on things, a new capacity for things, gives me a better understanding on how to like relate to others or how to challenge myself or how to work through problems or things like that. So it in my literally in my body, it feels more like I get to unfold at the presence of certain things that challenge me, problems, but also like wins, celebrations. It's a it's a felt sensation for me. It's like I'm not developing for something. It's not like a path that I'm pursuing. I am on the path is the typical thing like the path is the destination, and the journey is the destination. And I think unfolding is more gentle. It's more graceful. It's more human. And it's not related to productivity. And I think that was my personal sort of like aha moment. I was like, I don't want to give folks another chance at like being more productive or more outcome oriented. I want them to be informed, right? By themselves, and that unfolding resonates a little bit more.
Yeah, I think it also, we were talking a little bit about this this kind of theme in your life and how you mentioned that the answers are within. And I think unfoldment also implies that like you are an incredibly resourced being, right? Like all that you have is inside of you and you just have to kind of get out of the way so that it can emerge. And there's like an inherent wholeness there that we can access if we allow it. And it's such a powerful juxtaposition to this optimization productivity narrative that is, no, we need to build ourselves up. Oh, we need more, more. We need more, instead of actually we are already whole and we can just allow that wholeness to emerge in greater and greater depth that, has been covered up by a bunch of stuff from life. And that's been a big part of my journey as well, is that distinction.
Totally. Deeply resonates. I think like over the last few years in particular, I feel like the journey for me personally is to like more and more and more come back to just sort of like my essence, my roots of like what the bare, almost like witnessing myself more like a channel rather than like someone who holds like strong opinions or like, you know, knows exactly what the path is for myself and everyone else. Like I really love the idea of like, I'm just a channel. I'm here to sort of like guide myself and others, and not from like I am the guide. It's just sort of like I have the tools and the equipment, because of my own journey and because of all the tools that I had to sort of learn. Um, I I'm here to say like I want to give it all away. Do you want to have it? So it's an act of, yeah, it's an act of like deep service. If once you realize that you're just a channel for something else, right? That's where purpose, I think, comes from, like the innate purpose that we all like want to feel.
Yeah, I agree. It's, I remember there was a period of time where I thought like finding my purpose was some type of thing that was done through meditation. Like, oh, I'm going to do all these genius exercises. I'm going to read this book about, discovering my purpose and all this stuff. And at least in my own experience, it's kind of like the purpose and contribution is more emergent. It's more something that as you move into those deeper levels of authenticity through, processing many things that have been obstructing and impeding that, like that's when the purpose, the way that which you can serve that is uniquely you, just becomes self-evident. It just is. And that's just such a beautiful thing when you start to get in touch with that.
Yeah, and I think what's really beautiful about that is that you, quote unquote, care less about how it resonates with others and are more in touch with the idea that it will serve someone. Just that your sheer authenticity and your way of expressing is yours. And those who resonate with it will join. And so it's less of a, I feel like as a result of that, you're moving less into a push relationship with life and more into a pull relationship with life, and your work and, the relationships in general. There's something really powerful about that, what you just said. Like that pull, it's just sort of like, I am just who I am. And whoever resonates with that will join you, will join the party, basically. Right. But we're there's less trying to do something or be someone or things like that. It's just more like, hey, here's my way of expressing. Here are some of the things I believe in. Here's some of my non-negotiables. Does that resonate? So more pulling.
How did that show up in your life when you started to kind of live more authentically and have kind of more of a pull effect? Was there any kind of marked difference that you've observed?
Yeah, definitely. I think from a nervous system standpoint in particular, I felt less stressed, for lack of better word. I felt less exhausted in general, like doing the work that I love to do. There was less efforting in my day to day, and less of wearing different masks, quote unquote, in different areas of my life. It's just all Francie, no matter where I go. I realized that, like, that a few weeks ago, again, of just, we had friends over and we went to the beach, and my kids were there, and it evolved into like, a pretty deep sort of like work-related conversation. I was helping someone with something, and my kids were all there, and my husband was there, and it was a beautiful day. And it's just all one. There's no separation. I feel like I'm living a life of very little separation, and that is extremely powerful and liberating. Like, I'm the full package. There's nothing that I wouldn't say at work that I wouldn't say with my kids or with friends or things like that. So.
Yeah, the word that brings up for me is alignment.
Yeah, absolutely.
Living in alignment, and it, so much of your work that I've explored makes this physical connection between the body and the way that we show up that I really do believe is an emergent field. I know, is it what's the word? I'm trying to think of the exact word, but I was reading it in one of your posts.
Oh boy.
It's like psycho neuroimmunology, which is basically the mind body, the mind body connection, how our essentially the way we're living tends to express physically in our physicality.
Yeah.
And
even very simply in our immune system too. Right.
Completely. And I experienced this firsthand that when I was living out of alignment, like I thought I could just get away with it so that I could get what I wanted. And I was going to keep doing it until I got the thing I wanted. And it just started to show up in my body, literally.
In what way?
And become, I was sick for like 2 years. Immense fatigue. I developed laryngitis for 5 months, where I literally couldn't talk. I couldn't podcast because I couldn't talk. I had to go to a speech pathologist and learn how to speak again. It just felt like I started to have allergic reactions. I had this constant mucus in my throat. It was just terrible. And what I didn't realize is my body was talking to me. And so I really appreciate a lot of the stuff that you talk about, because it makes this connection, because where our body is kind of giving us information constantly, and we can listen to that or we can ignore it and try to press past it. And I just think this kind of somatic awareness is just such a fundamental part of us kind of just maintaining that alignment.
And it's our biology too, right? It's just like that we've been taught something else. Like the body has been talking to us all along. It's just that in sort of like mainstream education, we're taught that I call this the upper quadrant syndrome, right? Like it's all happening up here. Like all the big life decisions, all the analyzing, like all the ways of how we identify illness and stuff like that. It's just all up here. And then we just fix the problem as fast as possible. So, I have a headache. Oh, that's inconvenient. Let me take an ibuprofen, right? Like fixed. Great. Go. Right. I'm super tired. Oh, well, let me just drink another cup of coffee. That should fix it. Right. And then keep going. Instead of saying like, hey, what is the body actually saying right now? Oh, my body's tired. Fascinating. Right. Like, let me go take a nap. But it just doesn't fit into this type of performance-based culture that we're brought up in, starting very early on in school. You got to show up and have certain grades in order to be someone. And I think that is, it's extremely. It's like we learn really early on not to listen to our bodies. And kids actually show us the exact opposite, right? I'm sure you're seeing this with your child too. Like they know exactly what they need to do when they need to do it, and they signal in. Like they're tired, they go to bed, right? They fall asleep right there, right then, like no problem. And it's almost like we unlearned our innate responses as part of our conditioning. And I think it is, for many of us, it is the biggest journey to sort of like come back to being in alignment with our innate responses and understanding our innate signal, the innate signals of our bodies, in order to actually lead more effectively. If we want to like bring it back to sort of like this whole leadership unfolding theme, like I've never been better setting boundaries and delegating work, because I'm in touch with what my body can do and what my body can't do. I don't need to prove anything to myself anymore. I'm just being like, hey, hey body, what's up? And it's like, oh, there's a pattern, right? You've been consistently kind of like being challenged by this one thing. You're pretty exhausted about it. You clearly don't know what the next path is. Otherwise you wouldn't be struggling with it. Like I have headaches. I can't sleep so well at night. What do you need to do? Go get help, right? For instance, one example. So it's like, there's just like the truth that comes with that makes you more radically aware and serve more efficiently and effectively as a result.
Yeah, I think it's powerful to realize that like the body, when it is giving us that information, whether it's a headache or it's tired or whatever it is, I think, that conditioning makes it feel like an inconvenience, instead of an ally, instead of saying, hey, pay attention to this. You need to, understand why you're tired this day at every time, or, understand why you feel stressed about this thing that actually is pretty immaterial. And so, yeah, I completely agree. And, one direction I'd love to go in is you're very, I feel like fortunate myself. I would also put myself in this camp to kind of have this understanding while you have a young family. And that's something that, my parents, they still aren't really kind of in touch with a lot of this stuff. And I had to go and like unlearn a lot of things late in life. And it's such a unique opportunity now where it's like, hey, you have these 3 boys and you can teach them a lot of this stuff. And so I'd love to understand, like, how are you instilling some of this, or encouraging or allowing, I don't even know what the right word is, but just making sure that your kids are well positioned to be in touch with their bodies, be in touch with their emotions, be in alignment with what's actually happening with them.
Yeah, you're catching me. Yeah, you're catching me after a very emotional weekend with my children. And there was a moment yesterday in the car where I was like, fuck, this parenting thing is really hard. So I definitely don't have the magic pill, but I think I'm probably aware of a few things that to not turn those moments into traumatic events, or have at least the tools to kind of like bring us back together, even when things don't go as planned or don't go the way I wish they would have gone. So I'm not a perfect parent, but I think I'm a very intentional parent. And I think that's important, because with all the parenting advice that's out there these days, I think I want to be very careful with like, what is the magic pill that I have figured out? I'm also unfolding as I'm going through this. I think yeah, go ahead.
I was just gonna say, well, I would just be curious, like, what have you seen to be, for your particular family and your boys, like what has been seemingly helpful or supportive for them?
Yeah. we name feelings and emotions very clearly, and we don't shush them down, for instance. So when my children hurt them, when one of my boys got hurt on the playground, I would never go and be like, it's okay, don't cry. I usually say things like, let it all out. Let it all out until it doesn't hurt anymore. And funny enough, that invitation alone often soothes them very quickly. And I say, where does it hurt? What needs care right now? And then they show, and then, with the younger one, I have like, we push it into the sky. And with the older ones, it's sort of like, is there something that I can help you with? Or do you just want to sort of like, I'm just here and we'll both sort of like make sure that the pain goes away over time. And then, they respond. Sometimes they also just want their space. They don't want to be touched and all of that kind of stuff. And then I don't encourage it either. I'm like, okay, like you clearly need space. Like I'm gonna sit 2 meters away and be like, hey, I'm here in case you need me. Right? Like offering rather than like kind of like telling them what is most appropriate right now. That's a big one. And I'm noticing it because they're really good at saying what they're feeling. That is not always an easy one. But it's definitely powerful. It makes me really happy to see that they don't, in social environments too, that they're really good at saying what they're comfortable with. That they don't just, want to give high fives or hugs or something like that if they don't feel like it. But that they're also like super warm and, when with someone that they feel comfortable with. Like we've had a situation like that over the weekend where they met an old friend of mine, and after 5 minutes they were like playing cards with each other and laughing, and it was like clear that this person made them feel really safe and welcome. And I want them to have those type of experiences. I talk a lot about belonging, safety, and dignity in my work, as part of like we actually think about the belonging, safety, dignity as like that Maslow's hierarchy of needs for the nervous system. It's like at the very bottom, for a nervous system to operate in a state of fluidity, belonging, safety, and dignity is actually really, really important because it responds to our sort of like innate survival responses. And so I oftentimes sort of like check in with myself as a mother of like, have I nurtured their belonging, safety, and dignity recently? What is it that I can do to do that differently? What kind of conversations do I need to have? Do I need to say sorry? I'm really good at saying sorry as a parent. Something that I think was like one of the biggest pains from healing parts of sort of like where I come from. I haven't had some severe childhood trauma, and one of them is that I think I've never experienced that type of like human relatability with my parents, of just like how imperfectly perfect or perfectly imperfect they were. And I've never received a sorry. I've never received sort of like, hey, I don't think I reacted really well in this situation, or like I'm having a really hard day too, or crying in front of your children, right? So we're allowing all of those emotions in our home as one example.
I hope you're enjoying this conversation so far. If you like what you hear, let me know by clicking like, subscribing to the channel, and responding with a comment around something that you found interesting in the conversation so far. In addition to these videos, I do a lot of writing on the exploration of consciousness and my own personal revelations in my newsletter called Consciousness: The Doorway to Human Evolution. To receive these updates and more, all you need to do is simply head to the link in the description below, and you'll be added to the community of 20,000 plus consciousness explorers receiving weekly ideas and inspiration in their inbox. I look forward to hearing from you there. Now let's get back to the show. Switching gears a little bit, I've seen you use this word bottomless capacity. And
Yeah.
I don't actually know what it means, but I was very curious about it. And so, what is bottomless capacity?
Well, it's good that you're saying that you don't know what that means. Maybe I should change my marketing language.
I mean, but hey, you got my attention. So
Here we go. I guess
that's
that's true.
something to
Yeah.
be said.
I guess that's true. When I started this journey, so I started my own somatic journey after my dad passed away about 10 years ago. And if there's one thing that I didn't have, I experienced a lot of like panic attacks. I was very hopeless. I had a lot of like childhood trauma surface back up. It was a very, very dark time of my life. And I had taken care of him with my sister, and we were all on our own. And so when he eventually passed, it was like the saddest day ever. And it was like this odd sense of relief too, which probably usually wouldn't say out loud. But now I feel really comfortable doing so. And so I think it was my body speaking, saying like, you're completely out of capacity. Like my nervous system capacity was completely shot. Like the smallest amount of triggers, the smallest amount of like stress in my body would just like put me into very severe fight or flight responses. And it was the theme around capacity, that concept of capacity, that really helped me to build myself back up. I really often felt like I was like putting things back into my capacity bucket every time I did something good for myself, or I felt like, oh, something was resonating with me, or there was a spiritual sort of like moment that really nurtured me, a moment of breakthrough or healing that supported me. And so, or breath work or EMDR, like all of those like things that I did with my body, for my body. And especially also starting to listening to it. And so I built that capacity back up. And I think through somatics, through nervous system health practices, there is the biggest benefit to all of that is that we are able to hold life and the things that are happening to us and for us in a more literally capacious way. Like we can hold ourselves in ambiguity and sadness and devastation, but we can also hold us in like deep freaking joy, right? And laugh from our bellies and or scream on top of a mountain, right? Like all of those things that are not that we're not able to do when our nervous system is shot, when we're not able to hold ourselves, because everything triggers a stress response in our bodies. And so that's the origin of those two words.
I love it. I love that. And I also love how you brought up the positive stuff too, because I feel like a lot of times I didn't realize this until probably like a year or two ago, that I really didn't have the capacity to experience bliss beyond a
Yes.
certain amount of time. Like there was like this like artificial, like, okay, like this is over, like cut off experience. And I was like, what the hell? Like I have to teach
Yes.
myself to learn how to enjoy this, like retrain myself. And yeah, I mean, it's
So
very fascinating.
somatically, it's actually one of the most common ways of experiencing panic or anxiety. The expansion in our bodies makes us feel extremely uncomfortable because it makes us feel vulnerable. It makes us feel open. And vulnerability for the body is if your body experiences vulnerability or openness, expansion as a threat, right? Because, for instance, as a child, all your playfulness was met with annoyance or anger. It was like, shut up, be quiet, right? Don't be so loud. Like, go do that stuff, whatever it is, right? So your body kind of like is programmed in a way of just sort of like, I get to have fun up until this point. And so your body actually doesn't experience the full range of emotion anymore. It's actually interesting. We just pulled our kids out of the public school system, and my eldest is now going to a different school that just leans into curiosity and sort of like emotional development and character a little bit more, or character development unfolding. And I can see how he's more and more small steps, but more and more comfortable with expressing himself fully again, something that he had before he started school when we were still living in Germany. And it's really fascinating to see how fast it goes, how fast that actually like saves in the body of just sort of like, don't be too happy, something could happen and you might be sad again. So just stay in the critical sort of like space of just sort of like a little bit of joy and a lot of critical reflection, because that might not last long, and you want to make sure that you already understand what could hinder the expansion of that joy in the long run. So it's something that I work on too still. Like it's definitely a process.
How do we untangle that? I mean, what is I feel like there's a lot of good there's a lot of good practices I've seen around like, feel the anger, feel the sadness, feel this, and I don't see as much of the like, just feel the joy and like let the joy, you know what I mean?
Yes.
Or like, here's when you're limiting the joy. Like, I just don't see that as much. And would be curious kind of how you think about building capacity there.
Yeah. It's actually pretty unsexy. So
Take it.
there is, I think, one of the most tangible or most available practices that there is when you feel a sense of anxiety, panic, there's some level of sort of like uncomfortable feelings in general. Ask yourself whether that sensation is really that, like fear, anxiety, like some form of like quote unquote negative emotion or contracting emotion, or whether your body is not allowing you to go into a positive place. I do this all the time. When I'm like in a situation where I know it's objectively positive, right? Like I can take myself out of that and being like, is this a positive moment right now? Or is like, what is being triggered here? And could I allow myself to enjoy this moment more? Could I go and be more participatory in this moment? Could I be more integrated or present with this moment? And would this actually turn this into a really joyful, harmonious moment? Because most of our sort of like responses that are conditioned are actually survival responses, right? So the body preserves either energy, preserves our survival, preserves some form of protection emotionally, or like is trying to like protect us emotionally. So ask yourself, like, is this a moment that I could enjoy more if I would allow myself? And then don't go all the way, but like make it gradual. Be like, what's like something within my capacity right now that feels a little bit more expansive, feels a little bit more like kinky or joyful or something like that. And then go do that next thing that feels within capacity, so you don't overwhelm your nervous system by going all the way to the other side, because then your nervous system is like, well, that was too much, and then we're going all the way back to like contraction, being like, I don't want to do this again. So yeah, it's a sort of like, it's a tiptoeing towards reducing that joy anxiety in that sense.
And it sounds like it builds upon the kind of muscle or reflex of noticing, of awareness, of seeing when we are contracted, seeing when we are not allowing, as kind of like a gateway to like, okay, cool, noted. How do I open to this more? How do I enjoy this? Like 1%, 2%, 3% more, whatever it is.
We call it seeing and sensing. What is it that I can see and sense? That I can gradually, the seeing and sensing, how can I gradually move, for instance, toward a more positive connotation, or like a positive, when I see this, my sensing is positive, right? I can see something and I contract, or I can see something and it expands me. And so how do I, right? Like, I mean, you could literally be like, when I see my kitchen and it's full of dishes, like, does this really have to affect me this much? Right? This is like a super real life example. Does it really have to affect me this much? Do I really need to contract and be like, oh God, I really don't want to do this? Or be like, hey, let me get my headphones and put on a nice podcast and some good music and just enjoy that moment right here, right now. Right? That's obviously has nothing to do with like ecstatic joy of doing the dishes, but we also don't want to be affected by like sort of like, or being at the mercy of our contracting emotions all the time. Like everyday life becomes so much easier being like, if we see the possibility in a moment rather than like the continuous kind of like, ugh. And that also gives us the chance to like really notice the deep negative, or like sort of like contracting emotions when they're really real. Because if all the emotions are like contracting and kind of like, ugh, then what's real? Like, as in like, what is it that I really need to investigate? Where do I really want to spend my time on understanding where I want to improve? So start small, right? Start with the dishes, I guess. That's what I'm saying.
Learn to love your dirty dishes.
Learn to
That
love your
feels like a
dirty
book
dishes.
title or something.
I know.
I like that.
I know.
I like that. Well, maybe, Franzi, I imagine there's some leaders listening to this that know they're living in their head and they want to live in their bodies a little bit more, maybe, but they're not really sure where to start. And so if someone kind of identifies as that type of person, what would you suggest to them?
I'll go back to the dishes. I feel like the biggest sign that we're spending too much time in our heads is actually that we're doing things with less presence. It's like we're moving through the motions of our days way too quickly, which means that our nervous system is constantly just catching up on us. Right? We're never actually integrating a moment. We're always just moving through. The way our body recognizes that is that, and I'm sure we've all felt this, is that the body, the day feels like one big mush, right? It's sort of like at the end of the day, you look back and you're like, what did I actually do today? And whoa, like, yeah, I guess I woke up and then now I'm here. Day's over, right? But actually a lot of things happen, right? Like you got up, brought the kids to school, like wish them a good day, like spend some time with your husband or your wife, like got some work done, had good conversations, all of those things. So a really great way to actually notice how your body moves through the day and the way you do it, and what it causes in your body, is to emotionally bank distinct moments in your day. So you wake up and you take a moment and you're like, okay, I'm awake. Right. I start my day with a 20-minute yoga nidra. Like, this is sort of like, this is what I do. I fill my cup. I fill my presence first. I want to come from a present place. And then I move into the day. And then when I switch tasks, so when I switch from one meeting to another, I always take a moment and being like, what was beautiful about this moment? Or what challenged me about this? Or why did this not resonate? Or something like that. And then I either write it down or I speak, it's like if my husband walks by, I'm like, what just happened? I'm like, there's some like co-regulating processing going on. So the dishes piece is like, can I really just do my dishes and not think about anything else? Can I really just watch myself doing the dishes and just be present with that? Right? Can I really just being present, like being on the ground with my kids? And I know this is hard. This is sometimes hard for me too. I'm just as human. Like I have to remind myself too and being like, put everything away. We're just here right now. But it really fills up your cup because all of a sudden you realize, man, I'm really doing a lot during the day. And how can I optimize my day for more presence? And as a result of that, I see a lot of folks delegating better or allowing themselves a little bit more slack and thinking more about like, not the quarterly goals, but sort of like the annual legacy or like the legacy in general. Right. So like our horizon broadens up because our peripheral vision, literally our peripheral vision starts to open up when our nervous system is more regulated. So a lot of like stress responses can improve radically when we allow ourselves to not switch into our next task just like that, but like take stock for a moment. That's a really, really good way. And then generally like becoming aware, like I said at the beginning, becoming aware of your emotional charge throughout the day, becoming aware of the emotional patterns that you're running into. What are patterns that you're continuously running into? It means that your body's saying like, had enough with this one, basically. And then being like, what is it costing me of continuing this? And what is my next best skillful action moving forward? Like not some rando action, but like what is the most skillful, aligned, right? We talked about alignment, aligned action that I can take from this new place of awareness. And then go do that, right? That can be that could be anything. But it gets more sophisticated the better you get at this. So it's a good way to start.
I love that. Some amazing suggestions, which I have been the beneficiary of. So I'm grateful that you shared that. And yeah, the refinement process that happens as you kind of go on that journey it's so rich, right? Because it's just like, oh my gosh, I'm seeing more and more, and I'm seeing it clearly, and it's just a blast. Well, Franzi, this has been a lot of fun. I know you have so much awesomeness that you're creating in the world with your podcast and your Substack and all that kind of stuff. So I want to just give you an opportunity to share all your creations if people want to follow along some more.
Yeah. Yeah, I write my Substack on the name is Leadership That Heals the World. We're about to rebrand into Leadership That Heals, so to be announced soon. The
Nice.
podcast has the same name. Then I'm not on many social media channels these days, but X is probably the one that I enjoy the most. So I think Franziska Gonder is my handle there. And then my most passion, the thing that I'm most passionate about right now is I'm actually started a research project around responsible tech for youth and children. You can find that under franziskagonder.com/research. And we're in phase 1 of like interviewing a bunch of like thought leaders in this space and just parents and like designers of technology products, founders, anybody in the field of artificial intelligence. We're trying to better understand, like, how do we design products and environments and just create a safe internet under the whole umbrella of what I talked about before: belonging, safety, and dignity. And that's sort of like my latest thought leadership project that I'm really excited about. So if anybody resonates with this, please reach out.
That sounds epic and much needed. So I'm glad that you're channeling some of your energy towards it. And for anybody listening, we'll definitely make sure to link all that out to make it extra easy for you. But Franzi, this has been amazing. I'm so grateful to have you on the show, and I encourage everybody to check all that stuff out. And I just want to say thank you for sharing yourself today and being present. It was a real joy to talk to you.
Likewise. Thank you. What a great Monday. I love Mondays. So thank you for making it extra special.
Oh, love it too. All right. Thanks, everybody.